This is a new voice for a new Scotland.
IndyPram. IndyPram is IndyPram on Indy Live Radio. IndyPram is IndyPram on Indy Live Radio.
Welcome to the IndyPram podcast on IndyLive.radio, and my guest today is Cathy Hannaway from Outer Hebrides for Scottish independence. Hello, Cathy.
Hi, Ray. How are you today?
We're good. First of all, what I'd like to find from yourself and also the listeners will be interested is, how is this coronavirus affecting yourselves in the Western Isles?
Everybody's concerned about the possibility of lockdown being lifted. Some people are saying, yeah, that's fine, lift lockdown on the island, but please keep the ferry locked down. I mean, as much as we love to see our visitors, and we really do, and we're a very welcoming community, but to be perfectly honest, we don't, at this particular time, want to have to deal with an influx of hundreds and hundreds of people bringing goodness and only knows what with it. Our community is a small community. Our hospital is not the biggest hospital. As much as we are prepared, it's still not the biggest hospital. And the last thing our hospital needs right now is to have more than it can cope with regard to infection.
What's coming across via CalMac at the present time?
CalMac are really doing a very good job. They really are. They're making sure that everybody, if somebody is coming across and it's to do essential work or whatever, they do have to have their paperwork in place. They have to be able to provide it. Anybody else has to be able to provide information that they indeed do have an island address, that they do live on the islands. Anything other than that just is not getting to cross the waters onto the islands at all.
No problem with the supply of food, etc.?
No, oh gosh, they were all going off their heads, weren't they? The first 2 weeks were just a nightmare. You couldn't even get a packet of pasta in this place. It was just ridiculous. I personally kept away from the shops because I thought, I can't be doing with this, And I tend to shop in my own local community shop anyway, and have done since before all this started. So the whole supermarket thing wasn't something that I was too concerned about. But yeah, the whole shopping thing, it just went totally off the scale. Supplies were coming across, but we were barely hitting the shelves, and the shelves were empty again.
Yeah.
And the ferry can only come across so much, But that's all calmed down. The shops are back to what they used to be again, and people have kind of calmed down a wee bit, and they've kind of, screwed their heads back on and started thinking a bit more sensibly. But, everything's fine. The supplies to the islands are fantastic. CalMac is really doing a fantastic job.
Now, considering that most people are on the Western Isles just now will be Western Islanders, how does it actually feel to be in isolation?
Well, I was actually kidding with a couple of girls at work. You know how we have our Sundays here and nothing moves, and I don't think birds fly. But I mean, I've been joking with the girls at work and thinking, gosh, see all those years we were growing up and Sunday was Sunday and you weren't allowed to do anything. We were just in training for all this other nonsense that's going on just now, Every day feels like a Sunday right now. There are people mulling about. There are people that are going out for their walks. People are going to the castle grounds. And as much as I'm aware, they are keeping to the social distancing. People are, going out and about, but they're not meeting for parties or for any of this kind of stuff, as far as I'm aware. But then again, I've been kind of just keeping myself to myself anyway. When I'm not at work, I just keep myself to the house, apart from going my one trip a day to the shop, which is literally a minute from beginning to end. From me leaving the house to getting back into the house, it's literally 2 minutes, Yeah, they're doing pretty well. They're doing okay. They're doing okay. But then again, island life is a bit more laid back in normal circumstances anyway. We don't have fast city life. although it's impacting people, I don't think it's impacting people to the same level as it would do with people who are used to living city lives and fast on-the-go lives all the time. I mean, we're not used to having the best of, we don't have a fantastic amount of shops anyway. Stornoway's a pretty quiet town in normal circumstances, apart from the summer season, of course, which we're quite happy to bypass for the moment. But yeah, I think people are coping. I think it's just people who have got vulnerable issues, mental health issues, who, even my own mental health, to be honest with you. I mean, I've had 3 meltdowns in 2.5 weeks, you know, because my annual leave had been taken off me when the COVID thing broke out, which is fine because everything kind of went up in the air for everyone. So then we were told when things went quiet a couple of weeks ago, you can have your annual leave just now because we have no cases, which meant the hospital was quiet. So take your annual leave now while the place is quiet before all hell breaks loose, kind of thing, you know. So I did. I took the 2 weeks that I was due. And oh my God, because I wasn't able to go to work, I haven't been able to see my kids because one of them lives in Benbecula, the other one lives in Glasgow. And I haven't been able to see the kids. And all of a sudden, the house I would normally feel kind of lonely anyway because I'm here on my own for the most part, all the time. But it felt 10 times, you know, it all of a sudden become magnified because I was used to friends coming in. And of course, I was used to the committee meetings every fortnight for our Indy group and having banter and so on, and people coming back and forth. And then all of a sudden, that's just been totally wiped away. And I did. I had 2 major meltdowns. And I thought, oh my God. And everything else that was going on in my life became magnified as well, you know. And I thought, God, see, when this is over, I'm actually going to take a break somewhere hot, you know. And kind of, the meltdowns kind of made me realise that I was actually, as a person, a lot more vulnerable than I actually realised I was, if that makes any sense.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I had always considered myself to be relatively strong of personality and so on and so forth. But yeah, I discovered that I too am actually quite a vulnerable individual.
Yeah.
And it was a bit kind of scary to realise it. You know what I mean?
Yes, when the normal pillars of support are not there for you, you start realising, you know, we're all a bit frail and we're all concerned. Yeah.
And I started feeling really upset, very angry. And oh gosh, Facebook was just putting me through the roof. I mean, totally. I mean, every time I opened it, there was another ridiculous piece of information coming out of Westminster that made no sense. I've just found the whole thing very frustrating, very upsetting. The fact, you know, like I said, I couldn't see my family, I can't see my friends. My sister came to the garden wall last week and she said, oh God, can I come in for a cup of tea? I said, yeah, of course you can. So she sat 12 feet on the other side of my garden. Yeah. And she said, just make me my cup of tea and put it halfway across and I'll pick it up. And I said, yeah, that's fine. And, you know, she sat something like 12, 14 feet away from me. And we had a blather and a cigarette and then off she went. I thought, you know what, you know how family really do your head in sometimes? And sometimes you go, oh my God, I could see you far enough. But you know what, I would give my eye teeth right now just to be able to go and sit in her kitchen or my brother's house or whatever and just talk about absolute nothing and nonsense.
Yeah, it's meetings like that you miss. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I had a phone call from my brother and I hadn't spoken to my brother for probably about a year and a half and he suddenly phoned me out the blue.
There's nothing about this that's good. Absolutely nothing at all. With regard to death, every life lost is one too many. But I think a lot of people have come to realise that there are some things that have all of a sudden become more important than others, because up until this point, everybody's been so busy with getting on with doing whatever they do that they've not really had time to sit down and think about the things that they might be missing in life or the people they might be missing, because, and I'm sure there are some people who haven't spoken for years for one reason or another, who have suddenly realised, oh my God, I need to actually make my peace with all this, because God knows what's going to happen. I'm angry at the fact that the population has been put into such a state of fear.
It's been a wake-up call from what I've been reading for a lot of people down south who have got more trust in listening to Nicola Sturgeon than they have listening to whoever is standing in place of the invisible man, also known as Boris Johnson.
Aye, well, and listen, I mean, the man that's actually got me raging at the moment is the chief medical officer. Anyway, I saw this particular video clip and it only lasted less than a minute, but it was the chief medical officer. And he was standing there stating that X amount of people whose deaths had been recorded as COVID, who had never actually even been tested. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, whoa, hang on a minute, that's not even legal. For a death to be recorded, it has to be an officially diagnosed condition. And you can't just go around saying COVID if it wasn't COVID. And I mean, how can they possibly even say COVID when it wasn't even tested, when the individual wasn't even tested? I mean, that has got to be illegal. You know what I mean? A death certificate is a legal document. And how is it possible to record a death that has not been a condition? Even a secondary condition has to be a proper diagnosis. And I thought, oh, you know what, this is just spiraling into lunacy.
Gives you no confidence at all.
And then you hear things like, oh yes, the kids can go to school, the teachers can go to school, people can car share to work, but you're not allowed to go to see mum and dad. And if you do, you've got to choose which one, and you have to stay 2 meters away. And I'm going, hello? How clever is this virus that it knows exactly who to attack? And I'm going, it's not going to attack the school children, it's not going to attack the teachers, it's not going to attack the car share people, as long as they keep their window open. But my God, it's going to attack me if I go and see my brother or my sister. I'm thinking, wow, you know what? I thought, this really is just absolutely out of control now. And it's actually becoming farcical. And it's starting to feel as if, I shouldn't even be saying this, I actually really shouldn't say this, but this is actually starting to feel like we've all been, I mean, the virus does exist, but it really is starting to feel like we've all been set up big time to put into a state of fear so that they can pass whatever they want to pass, so that we will give up our sovereign rights and do what we're told.
Right, because they're certainly wanting to make sure that there's no conversation regarding the Constitution, and even though Nicola Sturgeon and the other members of the SNP government have stated that this is not a time for talking about politics, they're certainly quite happy to throw such accusations at the Scottish government for what they're doing in relation, especially in relation to having a difference to England in the way things are going in the easing the lockdown, despite the fact that it's England that moved first away from a lockdown. I
actually think that maybe now is probably a good a time as any to actually start talking politics, to be honest with you, because this, if nothing else, has shown the Westminster government up for who they are and what they stand for, and the importance, the absolute utmost importance for Scotland to be able to take control. So should another situation like this ever occur, then we don't have to wait on Westminster to tell us when we can go into lockdown. We don't have to wait on Westminster to tell us when we can make our citizens safe. These decisions can all be taken there and then. But unfortunately for the Scottish government, things like instigating lockdown, Scotland had to wait until it was legally right in order that we could do that. You know what I mean? 23rd of March, I believe, was the date that we went into lockdown, yeah. But we couldn't go into lockdown sooner than that because we had to wait on everything being in place as per Westminster's instructions and so on and so forth. No, I'm not. Everything the Scottish Government has done, they have done it right. And they are going well and truly out of the way to make sure that we're all staying safe. I personally would like to see, although I've got my own views on what's going on, I still would like to see lockdown going on a bit longer. The second wave, if a second wave comes, could be fatal in a lot of ways. After this is all over and done with, well, it's actually never going to be all over and done with, to be honest, because, I mean, this is going to leave its mark. And things have changed in a lot of ways for a lot of people forever. But when the political side of things goes back to being political again, we definitely have to make decisions with regard to how we want to be led in the future should another scenario such as this one unfold ever again. Our Scottish Government needs to be in full control of the finances. It needs to be in control of absolutely everything so that we are not waiting around on what other people are doing and what money can be released to us and what money can't be released to us. We should be in a position where we can just make those choices, get what's required, prepare in every possible way for any eventuality without having to wait on the say-so from another country.
I would have preferred, even right now, a more aggressive stance of highlighting the discrepancies of the Constitution were mentioned in press conferences. I would rather Nicola Sturgeon actually said, we're not an independent country, so we can't do that. Yeah.
I do feel that the Scottish Government are actually sitting back and allowing themselves to be punch bags at the moment. I keep thinking to myself, my God, what's going on here? Should they not be coming out fighting?
Now, you were saying that you haven't even seen your son who's on Benbecula, so are you telling me that even inter-island travel has been restricted?
Oh, there's no travelling between islands at all. Well, the only thing that's allowed to happen with inter-island travel is if necessity, haulage and so on and so forth. It's all down to necessity.
Yeah.
Or if there's an urgent hospital appointment that has to take place, then maybe somebody will travel from US to Lewis for that urgent hospital appointment or admission or whatever. No, there's no commuting whatsoever taking place between the islands. Absolutely none, other than necessity.
Yeah. So what about people with special needs who are isolated in remote locations?
There's a lot of the community support groups. We've got a lot of community support groups throughout the islands, and I mean they've always been there, and they're effectively making sure that with the help of neighbours and people in the village and so on, that people are actually being checked up on and that people are okay and so on. And as far as I'm aware, I think we're all kind of looking out for each other.
I was listening to Radio Scotland and there was a travel expert on giving us advice, and someone had phoned up from near Glasgow saying that they had a second home. In fact, I believe they have two homes on Uis where they use as an Airbnb, and were asking whether they should be still taking bookings, and the travel expert said, yes, people should go out there and self-isolate.
Well,
incredible.
When all these reports started surfacing, I mean, was it last week? There was one particular newspaper suggesting that they could go to the Hebrides, and, I would go, hello, no, we don't want you. I mean, we'd love to see you any other time, but not now. Just stay where you are, be sensible, have some consideration for other people's lives, and just stay where you are, So there are some people who have got an address on the islands that they use as holiday homes or whatever, but that doesn't mean to say, okay, they own the house, but that doesn't mean to say that they can come to it in the middle of a lockdown. They still have to be sensible. Whether they own a house on the islands or not is neither here nor there. The point is, we're in a lockdown. We're in a lockdown for a reason. There's a lot of vulnerable elderly people on these islands. And they're somebody's family. All these elderly, vulnerable people belong to someone. They are somebody's granny, they are somebody's mother, they are somebody's father. And we want to make sure that they're still around to enjoy their grandchildren or whatever. You know, we don't want to lose them needlessly to a virus.
Yeah.
You know,
you've had six cases, I believe.
We've had 6 cases which weren't serious. They all went home, and as far as I'm aware, they're all fine now. The last recorded case we had was, I think, the 4th of April. But our hospital is in serious lockdown here, Ray. It really is. I work at reception, and which is pretty much across from the front door. And literally nobody gets past that front door. There's security on the door. There are 2 security, well, they're actually employees of the Western Isles Health Board who all take turns at acting as security. And there are 2 people on every day. And from 8:30 to 5:30, and not a thing gets through that door, not even a bag with a bag of biscuits in it gets through the door. It gets through the door, but it gets left with security, and then we make contact with the ward to let them know that whatever it is there for that particular patient. Could a staff member please come down and collect? And staff member will come down and collect. Nobody gets through that. Nobody gets past security in that hospital. Absolutely nobody. Even I forgot my swipe card one day, and I'm heading towards the door, and I thought, oh God, I've got my swipe card. Oh, jinx. And this particular security person, who I didn't really know very well, came to the door and said, and you are? I said, I'm Cathy, I work at reception. So if it wasn't for the girls behind reception saying, yeah, she's fine.
Yeah, you would have got
I was going to be getting the 3rd degree, you know.
Yeah.
But we're actually very well organised, to be honest with you. I don't know if anybody's been listening to our Chief Executive's updates, but Gordon Jameson, our Chief Executive, makes regular updates by video, and he updates us all the time. And oxygen and everything, you know, more oxygen has been installed in the hospital, so on and so forth. So that should it be required, it's all already there. We are really very well set up, but the last thing we need is a mass invasion of holidaymakers, because our facilities just would not be able to cope with any epidemic. As well prepared as we are, they're prepared in terms of thinking with regard to the population that we already have. And for thousands of holidaymakers to start walking up, and for people to become, you know, infected with this disease, it's really going to make things very difficult. Very difficult.
How do you feel the economy on the Western Isles is going to suffer?
Oh,
because this summer is going to be written off basically as far as tourism is concerned.
Yeah, well, unfortunately for the whole of the Western Isles, the majority of the Western Isles economy is actually tourist-based, and we are as a group of islands going to be taking a terrible hammering, you know, with regard to all that. But you know what though? People actually don't really care. You know, Joe Blogs standing in Tesco's, if you were to talk to them, they don't care. They don't want to see the tourists this year. They're all hoping that CalMac just keeps, you know, even if lockdown was lifted today, everybody's hoping here that CalMac stays in lockdown.
Yeah.
You know, we don't get a lot of holidaymakers coming onto the islands via flights anyway, because it's too expensive. There's no, you know, nobody can afford to come on a holiday here by flying. We don't get a lot of holidaymakers who come via flying. All our holidaymakers come via the ferry with their cars and their caravanettes and so on and so forth, and their camping gear and so on. But okay, the bed and breakfasts aren't going to agree with Joe Blogs about, you know, keeping the lockdown with ferry, but the people on the whole want lockdown to continue throughout the summer. they all want lockdown. With regard to the Minch, they want that part of lockdown to continue. The islands will recover, because the things that make the islands such a draw are always going to be there. You know what I mean? And it's still all going to be here next year. The Harris Tweed is still going to be here next year. You know, our sites, all these things, they're all going to be there next year. We've got the opportunity to start putting back on all, you know, bringing all that back next year. But for this year, can we please just get over this first, kind of thing? And then think about how we're going to pull it all back together.
Cathy, one subject which I'd like to speak to you about was the march, the Stornoway March for Outer Hebrides for independence that you were going to run this year and had to cancel.
Yeah, when the whole thing broke out with COVID, we decided pretty much straight away, this march can't go ahead. We cannot take an influx of people onto the island. It just is not going to happen. We're going to be putting people's lives at risk. This can't happen. So in fact, we didn't even have a meeting. I just went straight into the WhatsApp group and I said, right, guys, we've got to talk about this now. We can't organise a meeting right now, but how do you all feel? And we all unanimously said, no, call it off. And we contacted the council. This was before lockdown even happened.
Yeah.
We contacted the council immediately and we told them that due to the situation with COVID, that we were pulling the plug on the march and that we were considering holding it later on in the year. But of course, as things unfolded, it became quite clear that that wasn't going to be happening either. So we contacted all our speakers, our entertainers, everybody involved, and they said, no, that's fine, Cathy. As soon as everything's okay to go again, just contact us and we're back on with you.
Yeah.
So everybody that we had on board before is still on board for whenever we do manage to put the march on.
Yeah.
We're looking at April next year, because April is better for us, because as you can imagine, well, you've been to the island, Ray, and you know that we don't have a huge amount of accommodation here on the islands anyway. And we cannot hold a march in tourist season because there just wouldn't be enough accommodation available to accommodate any visitors for the march. So we have to do it out with tourist season. So we either do it before the tourist season or after. But the tourist season here finishes the first week in October or something. October here is not good. So we cannot really look towards that time of year because ferries get cancelled so regularly. You know, people would probably lose money on trying to come here October, November time.
Yep.
Through one, ferry cancellation after another, So April is really the best time for us. So but if we're forced into having to do it, somewhere in the summer, then we will do, because we are going to go ahead if we can next year. But we are hoping that we can go with our usual month of April.
Well, good luck with that, because it's a shame after all the planning that goes involved and all the work that the committee will have been doing to arrange this, but when needs must. And what was the reaction from the council when you told them?
No, the council thanked us very much for being so considerate and so on. And I contacted the police station because we all work together. We all really do work together. We have meetings with each other and so on. And by the time a march kicks off here, everybody is working together.
Yep.
And we as a group, we contacted them all, and they were all absolutely over and in with the decision. They thought that it was admirable of us to take other people's safety into account and so on and so forth. And they said that they looked forward to hearing from us when the right time for that.
Yeah, very good to keep them on side. Very good that
yeah.
There's good relations, etc. Mm-hmm.
And they've told us that we don't have to put in a new application, that the application will just flow on the previous application and the previous permissions will just flow on to the next one.
That's excellent. That makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Super.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the way things are moving now that obviously there's no active campaigning for independence, but how do you feel things will change going forward, and any thoughts on the campaigning side and the challenges that the Yes movement will have?
I think the Yes movement is going to be slightly affected by all of this, to be honest with you. I think Westminster, being Westminster, are going to have things tied up in such a way where the Yes movement are maybe initially going to struggle to be able to put the marches on, because I think they're going to try and bind us up in all kinds of, laws and legislations with regard to large gatherings and so on. But the Yes movement, I don't think is going to be paying much attention to that. And if they don't pay too much attention to that, then I'm up for that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Nobody gets anything by lying down and taking a lot of nonsense, The Yes movement aren't going anywhere. They're just taking a breath at the moment, Ray. They're just taking a wee deep breath at the moment. I mean, people are ready to go, but they're being considerate towards what their circumstances are at the moment. And to be honest, I think it's completely insensitive to go too heavily into starting a campaign at the moment while people are dying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it just should not happen at this present time and moment. But when we are in a position, when all the groups are able to start, mobilizing themselves again, I actually think we're actually going to come back stronger.
Yeah.
Because I do believe that this whole scenario has actually brought more people to the Yes movement.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been impressed with how Nicola has stood up for Scotland, especially people who in the past maybe didn't consider the Scottish government as a serious option, but now they're even down south they're impressed. But I think up
well,
here,
I never thought I would say this, Ray, but I'm actually liking Piers Morgan at the moment.
Yeah, I think a few people are saying that.
Usually, when I watch Piers Morgan, I literally want to kick my TV in. But for the last few weeks, I've been going, "Oh, go yourself, Piers," and he's actually been addressing her in the correct manner as well.
Yes.
Nicola Sturgeon, which is an absolute turnaround. And he has been speaking with such a high regard and respect for her. He's found a whole new respect for her now, and he literally is the only person in the country at the moment who's actually holding or trying to hold Westminster to account.
Yeah.
And
he's been ignored.
And he's been ignored.
Mm-hmm.
I found a newfound liking for Piers Morgan. I don't say it won't last for very long, but...
Anything more on the independence movement and the challenges ahead?
Well, yes, that I do actually have a point I would like to raise on the whole way things should move forward. I think, sadly, a lot of people think that the Yes movement is primarily Scottish people, when in reality, indeed, it is not. The Yes movement is absolutely full of people who have moved up from England, who have seen the benefits of living in Scotland, and who fight tooth and nail for Scottish independence. You being one of them yourself, Ray. A lot of people down in England, they move here a lot of them to the islands. In fact, I know a lot of English people who've moved to the islands, and not only have they just moved to the islands, they've actually immersed themselves in our culture. They join our Gaelic choirs. Now, they don't speak Gaelic, but it's actually very easy to learn a song in any language, and they immerse themselves in the culture, they immerse themselves in the musical side of things, they join local orchestra bands and so on and so forth, and they really do get stuck in and about the whole thing, and they completely they really do enjoy their lives here, and now they can't think of anywhere else they want to be, you know. And sadly, my own opinion on who actually kind of halted independence in Scotland are not the English people living in Scotland. Sadly, it's the Scottish people living in Scotland. And that's a sad fact, but a fact just the same. And we need to actually get the Scottish people to realise the potential of their own country.
Why do you think it is that so many Scots don't believe in self-determination?
I mean, I know a few people myself who I grew up with. There's one particular person that always brings to mind, who I'm not going to mention. But, you know, I mean, I grew up knowing this person, and we both grew up with the same kind of lifestyle, you know, small village on the island, so on and so forth. And this person has gone just from one extreme to the next, you know, pretty much an out-and-out Tory now. You know, and I look and I go, whoa, what's going on here? Hang on, just a minute, you know. And, you know, there are people here who, I can only speak for what I see in our own community. I can't speak for somebody who lives 10 miles outside Glasgow or 10 miles outside Inverness. I can only speak for what I see here on the islands. And there are a lot of people on the islands who just do not want independence, because it's the whole Queen and country thing, and God save the Queen this and God save that and the next thing. And, you know, everything's Queen and country. But they don't understand that how they live and how their lives are affected by politics has got nothing to do with the Queen. You know, I mean, we're talking about a woman here who sits on a chair every Christmas at 3 o'clock with billions of pounds worth of jewels on her head, you know, on a chair that costs I don't know how much. And she sits there and tells us that we all have to live within our means. And now we grew up with all this in our living rooms on the islands, you know, and you've drip fed this your whole life. So it gets to a point where this is all you know. And some people just can't seem to move from that. Well, I personally take serious offence to somebody with millions of pounds worth of jewels sitting on her head telling me how to live within my means. You know, and I'm sorry, but that's not even right in this day and age, to be honest with you. And I mean, we're talking about Scotland is now full of food banks. You know, we've had COVID. We've had people living under the most stressful situations, living sometimes in some horrific scenarios, and we've got royalty with their billions and not parting with one penny to try and alleviate the situation in any shape or form.
I think it's the case that we really need to concentrate not so much on the ultra-British nationalists within Scotland, but really concentrate on the undecided, the soft nose. And there's also a lot of people who were yes, but at the last minute went to no when it came to 2014. And they just needed a bit more confidence and inspiration. I would really hope that by now the SNP would have come out with the economic case that they said they were preparing for coming out this summer. They may well still do, I don't know, but I'm sure someone must be still working on it rather than buttonhole this and forget about it until next year.
Yeah.
I'm sure something should come up, but we certainly need some meat on the bone as far as conversing people who were dissuaded by arguments of currency and economy. We really have to have the meat on the bone to converse those across, be more positive. But I think I'm more positive whenever a referendum is called, and the sooner the better, that it will produce a yes vote, because I don't think we can afford to hang on for too much longer, especially with a hard Brexit coming up.
I totally agree with everything you're saying there, Ray. The strong-minded British nationalists, as you say, are not going to budge. And we do just have to concentrate on those who are kind of sitting on the fence. But a lot of these Brit Nazis, or whatever you want to call them, they turn around and say stupid things like, oh, I don't do politics. Politics doesn't affect me. And I remember going to choir one night when the first referendum was coming up. And it was a couple of months before the referendum. And I went to choir one night, and I had been having one of my usual rants on Facebook, as I do. And one of the girls that was in choir had obviously seen this rant, and she said to me, oh, Cathy, you really need to just calm yourself down, And I said, excuse me? She said, all this ranting on Facebook. She says, I've got to the point, she says, well, I'm just going to be blocking you, And I said, well, you just fire in, you help yourself, delete me if you want. I said, I really don't care. I said, and anyway, I said, what's your problem? She says, I don't do politics. I don't do politics. I said, well, I'm sorry, but my rant wasn't directed at you, it was just directed at people in general. And she says, politics, it's got nothing to do with my everyday life. Well, I turned around and I said, excuse me? I said, how do you reckon that? And she said, politics, it's just politics. I'm not interested. And I said, well, every time you go to the shop and you buy a loaf and it's jumped up by 10 pence, or whenever you go to the petrol station and your fuel has jumped up by 20 pence, or whatever. I said, that's all politics. Oh, for goodness sake, don't talk your nonsense. I said, it's all politics, because everything that happens in your life is bound by politics. How much you get paid? Do you get a pay rise? No, you don't. Yes, you do. Maybe not. I said, does your bread go up in price? Does your petrol go up in price? Everything is politics, because these changes come about due to taxes, due to various different economic levers, and people are forever pulling them and pushing them to suit themselves with regard to how they want, if they want austerity pushed, or if they want to give tax relief to the rich, or whatever. I said, that comes down to what happens in your purse. I said, so don't sit there and tell me that you don't do politics. I'm sorry, but you do politics whether you like it or not, because when you go home at night and you're going home complaining about the 10 pence that you paid for the loaf, that you paid more for the loaf that you didn't pay last week, you are complaining about politics. You just don't realise that you are doing that.
That is the point, though, Cathy. Most people don't realise that politics affects every part of their life. Well, yeah. Listen, it's been great having a catch-up with you again, Cathy. Thank you very much indeed for your contribution to the IndyPram podcast. And I look forward to having another blether with you another time in the future, because it's great to get the point of view from the Western Isles.
Oh, thank you very much, Rhian. It's been nice talking to you again. Look forward to it another time.
Right. All the best to you and all our friends at Outer Hebrides for independence.
And to you and Sandra as well, of course. Okay.
Thank you very much indeed, Cathy. Thank you.
Okay. Stay safe. Bye.
IndyPram, yes, IndyPram, on Indy Live Radio. IndyPram, yes, IndyPram, on Indy Live Radio.
This is a new voice for a new Scotland.
IndyLive.radio.